Those big booms that happen in your life, aren't they wake-up calls? Aren't they invitations? Isn't the sunrise a wake-up call? But most of the time, we've seen it so often we forget. But when we get slapped across the face with something we did not expect, something difficult comes our way, isn't it always a wake-up call? What is it a wake-up call to? It's a wake-up to wisdom. The loss is a wake-up to wisdom. The victory is a wake-up to wisdom. The sunset, the sunrise are an invitation to wisdom. They all are for the same thing. It's just that we listen better when we are forced to. We actually pay attention when it hurts, when the loss is there. And wouldn't true wisdom be beyond the field of right and wrong, be beyond the field of winning and losing? Today is the weekend of Memorial Day. It's part of a time in which we remember those who have died in service, military service to this country. In the course of our American history, there have been 1.1 million people die in military service. Now, I think that's a big number, and I often have felt like we could have done better. But the people who died in service to this country died for two things, I think, predominantly. Typically, they say in combat, it is the people don't die for their country so much as they die for their friends that are right beside them. That it's the ones that they can see and touch and feel that they care the most about. And for them, they were willing to put themselves in more danger than otherwise so that their friends might live. I think that's true of most of us as well. We are more connected to some people than others, but what really gets us is when we have built a bond with people and we have a chance to do something for them, and we, more often than not, are willing to do it. And when that is this kind of the underlying call of what it is to be a human being, is to be willing to give so that others may have a better life. And I suppose the secondary thing is for the country and for the values that this country stands for. It strikes me that the real idea of winning and losing in a war is not so much whether the battle is won, but whether we've been able to allow that which we hold as highest ideals to further. And by further, I mean that we may have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in our country, and that we might treat others as ourselves, that we might be, as we have often professed to be, a beacon of democracy, that we have promoted things so that others might have a better life. And in some ways, it is extending that thing of friendship from just ourselves and the people around us to the world at large. And that, I think, is the reason for battle, for war, for extending our power in other places. And things that don't resemble that diminish the lives that are lost in that process by the degree to which we no longer can believe in those. And I think that's what happened in Vietnam. This is my era, when I was most attentive to war, was we had a hard time bringing those people who had given so much home and bringing them in because we saw that we were not living up to our ideals as a country, and to some degree we foisted our guilt on them. And I apologize to those men and women who went to Vietnam, who came back and did not have the love and respect that I think they deserved. So, which brings me to the topic of today, which is about winning and losing. There is a quote by Rumi. Most of you know Rumi, and most of you know this quote, which is, "There is a field out beyond right and wrong. I'll meet you there." And that, I think, should be our life. I grew up in a very competitive sports mindset. I made it up myself. Nobody else in my family was that dedicated to it, but I was extremely dedicated to winning. I had a rival who was exactly my age, almost exactly my size, and he was usually better than me. And it pushed me because I always wanted to beat him. I remember when I was 10 years old, I'd been on the Sanford Squids swimming team. Great title. And we had 2-a-day practices, but I also worked out in between because I really wanted to beat this guy. 10 years old. And one night actually, I beat him in one of the strokes that we both swam, and I ran to my mother and I just went crazy saying, I beat Don. And my mother was looking at me a little bit like, good, but you know, that's Don's mother right there. Well, Don and I continued that all the way through high school, and it made me a better athlete for sure because I always had him to push against in some way, and I appreciate that. I would not have done as much as I did, I don't think, without him. And if I was still a 10-year-old, I would think that winning was the thing. But it really wasn't. It was like, it was the pushing. The competition was not so much to win, but to be better. And to move your emphasis from winning to being better is, I think, the wiser way to go. Now, as a kid, you wouldn't expect me to know that. I wouldn't wake up in the morning going, gee, I'd just like to be a better person. No, I wanted to beat Don. And I got up at 7 in the morning every summer day to go swim and beat Don. But as a mature person, shouldn't we shift our attention from winning to being better? And now I know it's quite good when we can have something that we win. I really like winning. I fortunately went to the University of North Carolina, and so I can claim wins a lot, you know, in basketball. Oh, you poor other people out there. But isn't it just the full experience of getting your juices going? Isn't that really what we're after? And I know some people whose day is ruined when they lose or their team loses. There's a story here, there's a quote here I want to tell you. It is by one of the athletes who was playing with professional basketball, and they had won 17 in a row, which is pretty impressive for professional basketball. And so the reporter went to him and said, I want to hear what you have to say about after you lost, because they lost at home. They lost after 17 wins in a row. And the player is quoted as saying this: early in the 1969 and 70 season, we went on an this is Phil Jackson speaking, who's the coach of the Bulls and the Lakers, and won 11 NBA championships as a coach and 2 or 3 as a player. And he's talking about how he motivates his team to win because he is the most winning coach in professional basketball. And a well-respected man in all fields of sport because he was also called the Zen coach. He was writing about this teammate of his on a team that went 17 straight and then lost. Early in the 69-70 season, we went on an 18-game winning streak, pulled away from the rest of the pack. When the streak ended with a disappointing loss at home, reporters asked Red what he would have done if the Knicks had won. He replied, I'd go home, drink a scotch, and eat a great meal with his wife, Selma. And what would he do now that he's lost? I'm going to go home, drink a scotch, and eat a great meal with Selma. Because winning and losing is part of life, isn't it? It is part of the whole texture of life. And most of us have this idea that we can continually win and win and win and win and never lose. And I think that hasn't proven to be true for most of us. It's proven that most of life has its ups and downs. And if it were to be graphed, it would look like a sine wave that we see repeated in so many places, the stock market, oscilloscopes, and even your heart does this thing. That is the nature of it. And I believe wisdom is really knowing that that is the nature of it. That sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. And sometimes the losing is what gets you to win. Because I lost to Don, I swam harder at every practice, and I worked out an hour in between just so I could beat him. I wanted to get from here to here. That was part of it. But also in that process, I was transformed from a scrawny kid to a swimmer, right? And that was the win, along with beating him, of course. But this is the way of it, you know? Now, one of the things that happened to me, and I am bragging a little bit, but I was, Don and I continued through high school in the same town, and we wrestled. Both of us wrestled. He was better than me. Again, I could not beat him in the 9th grade. I had to go up a weight class. I had to go up a weight class and fight guys who were bigger than me. And because they were bigger than me, it was, well, some things didn't turn out so well. But over time, I got to wrestle against him on a daily basis as we trained. And then in the end, I was wrestling for the state championship, and Don was not. And and I get to the state championship and I lose it, even though I knew how to win. I just choked. It's one of those things that has haunted me for a long time. And the reason it's haunted me is I didn't have the wisdom about it, that I could have taken what happened there as the lesson for the next thing in life. Instead, I took it as a defeat. It was the defeat of my high school career, right? Everything had gone. Do you know what I mean? It's like the one thing I was that close, missed, lost by a point, right? Well, if we take our losses as losses with no redeeming value, then they haunt us, don't they? I blew it. And therefore, there is a tail in a footprint in my psyche that has this loss, loser, da-da-da. It doesn't have, because I didn't convert it into something that said, yes, that's how you lose, this is how you win. I carried just the stamp of the feeling of the loss rather than the lesson in it. So I want you to consider some of the things that have happened in your own life that definitely felt like losses. I like to say here in this church, the way people ask how they come to this church, I say they come to us after their first divorce. Because many of us were living in a world with a philosophy that we had grown up with, that in that moment of great loss, we went, there must be more to it than that. What else is out there? How can I be better? How can I transform this experience into an experience that I would like to have? How can I convert the bottom of the sine wave into the top? And they come to this church. So many of us come when we have had a loss. For those of you who didn't, you're welcome as much as everybody else. But so this is what the loss is there for, to teach. How much do you learn when you win? Most of us go, I'll just do it again. That's the next, just do it again. Well, as Phil Jackson says in his book, that isn't the way to win. To win is to keep growing and to do something new every time, because what worked in the past will probably not work again. His idea is to keep improving, but nothing causes us to improve as much as a loss. When we take it as a lesson, as an experience from which to bounce off of and go up. That is why losses are so beautiful. That's why rivals are so wonderful. That's why your enemy makes you better, is because they invite you to learn something, to grow and to become. The Dalai Lama is famous for saying he is grateful to the Chinese because they have forced him to really become compassionate, to transcend his own personal likes and dislikes at an even higher level, because they have been so cruel to the Tibetans that he is forced to push his own level of compassion to a higher level. The enemy is the friend of your development, if you take it. And to get beyond winning and losing is to realize that this whole game of life is one big, long experience that invites us to take our losses and what's missing and to go look and become a winner in a certain sense, and to take that not as the final thing, but as a step along the process and a way of knowing progress in that process, that we're now moving toward a deeper, wider understanding, something greater, that we're here to be more than simply a winner or a loser. We are to be something that transcends that. There's a phrase here, I've forgotten who said it. Joy is that kind of happiness that does not depend on what happens. Joy is that kind of happiness that does not depend on what happens. How many of us, I'll just ask you this, how many of you have said to me after I had the heart attack, oh, well, I guess that was a wake-up call. Oh, I feel like fighting words there. You saying something about my character or my personality or what? But isn't it true? Those big booms that happen in your life, aren't they wake-up calls? Aren't they invitations? Isn't the sunrise a wake-up call? But most of the time, we've seen it so often we forget. But when we get slapped across the face with something we did not expect, something difficult comes our way, isn't it always a wake-up call? What is it a wake-up call to? It's a wake-up to wisdom. The loss is a wake-up to wisdom. The victory is a wake-up to wisdom. The sunset, the sunrise are an invitation to wisdom. They all are for the same thing. It's just that we listen better when we are forced to. We actually pay attention when it hurts, when the loss is there. And wouldn't true wisdom be beyond the field of right and wrong, be beyond the field of winning and losing? And wouldn't our relationships go so much better if that thought of winning and losing were not so prominent in our discussions? Wouldn't our politics, for instance, seem to be more agreeable, at least, if they weren't so much about winning and losing? I've been watching, and I don't mean to make this too much of a political commentary, but I've been watching how Congress has been going, where winning seems to be much more important than getting something done, right? And up until the point where it becomes desperate that we get something done, and then they go, okay, well, let's just join together for a little bit. We'll go back to fighting later. So they know how to do it. And I believe that ultimately this will win out. That ultimately the needs of growth and health and prosperity will win out over winning and losing in the political system. that we as a country will affirm that we are one nation under God, that will be more true than the need for our tribe to win. We'll come back to that. How many times is that not reflective of our own psyche? That we are tribal inside our own psyche, that we only like the world to be a certain way. We only want it to be that way. If it's like that, then we can win. If it's like this, we feel like we're losing. I want to take this a little deeper. Everything you know, everything you have ever seen, every story you have ever heard, everything appears so often to be on the outside, but you only know it from the inside. The light you see comes into your eyes, and we see it on the inside, not on the outside, right? It appears out there, and what we see often reflects what's out there, but not completely. It's not the total picture, it's just what happens to get through our senses into our eyes. What we hear in the same way, we hear in a small range. Dogs hear much higher pitched stuff, whales much lower pitched stuff. We only hear this, we hear that, which we often are expecting to hear in conversation, whether it is more or less that way. We filter it because that's the nature of the mind, is to reinforce what it already knows. In the world it already knows, to fit it into the slots it already knows. And so the whole of the totality of all your experience, none of it happened out there, all of it happened in here. The stories you tell are stored in here, not out there. All of your experience is your own. So what would be wise if you knew all your experience was your own? Would you not be a better curator of those experiences if you owned that you are making them so? You're interpreting the data of the outer world, right? You're using your formula, your history maybe, but basically you have a formula for understanding what the data is out there in your system, and you decide what it means to you. It doesn't have meaning outside of you because it doesn't happen outside of you. It can't have meaning from the outside. It can only have meaning from the inside because the whole game is inside. This is a tricky one to get, I must say. Do we not believe that this is there? And it might be there. But it's definitely here. That's where I see it. I don't see it over there. It appears over there. It's a great, I don't know, what is that? What do you call that thing where it appears, where it is in here, but it appears out there? Life? I don't know. When we get that all that is happening and all that will ever happen to you is internal, you're coming to a place where you are the decider if you win, you're winning or losing, or the meaning of winning and losing is all inside you. All of it. Because all the data is inside you. All the formula for interpreting the data is inside you. All the memory is inside you. It's all here inside you. You're interpreting the data that comes in based on something, but that is your interpretation. It's big, isn't it? It's ridiculously upside down from where we normally see it. Which means you don't have to have anything happen on the outer world for you to have a different experience on the inner. That's where joy is a reflection of you, not of the outer world. Because the outer world, you can maybe adjust. Maybe you think you need some particular person to love you, or you will not be happy. Anybody ever have that happen? Anybody here on their second divorce? We think we need them to act a certain way for us to have an internal experience. We think we need to win to feel like a happy person. We think if we lose something that we're diminished by it. We think if someone in our world says something nasty to us, that we have to take it personally and feel hurt. We feel as though we are an effect of the world, and yet the whole world resides within your own mind. Your world, at least. All of your world exists in your own mind. And to shift how that world is an inside job. You can manipulate the world as much as you want, but the fact of the matter is that you can only change other people so much. So if you need the world to be peaceful, for you to be peaceful, I don't even need to finish the sentence. If you need someone to love you before you can love, If you need to win before you can be a winner, you're just a child that has not grown into maturity of knowing who you really are. And we're all children in that way. We all have those tendencies to want the world to change so that we can feel differently. But that isn't the truth. The world can be as it is, and you can feel differently. You can experience the world differently. It can unfold in new ways in your understanding if you will change your mind. Classic line from the Bible where Paul is telling his flock to renew their mind, that the mind that was in Christ Jesus might be in your mind. Which means that the world that he lived in might be the world you live in. That the experience he had might be your experience by changing your mind. And the problem, of course, is it's not even in our language. Hardly in our language at all. About really seeing that the world is inside you. And when someone says that, it sounds, that sounds so like hypothetical. So mystical or so other. That can't be really real for me. But think about it. If you haven't already, take Memorial Day and think about it. This could be the good death of your previous self-understanding. When you realize you don't have to change the world to have a changed experience. That could be a death worth having. That egoic state that says, it has to be this way. I have to have a good job or a car or a girlfriend or a husband or a dog or my cat or whatever it is. I have to have that be a certain way or I can't be happy. Is to really limit yourself to a reactive state. When in fact you are the governor of your own experience, and owning that, radical as it seems, is a fight worth having, is a battle worth having in understanding, to bring your understanding to the clarity. And if that worked, if we could do that across the board, would this world be as it is right now? Where so many people think they must win at the cost of others to be happy? That would go away, wouldn't it? If you knew that happiness was an inside job, you wouldn't need all that. You could just be happy. And this might be a big hill to climb. I get it. I'm not there. But isn't it the possibility that we could change our minds and literally change our experience. And over time, wouldn't that not change the world? That's something to think about. Let us pray. Let's expand our sense of being at this moment. As we sit here with our eyes closed, let's extend our awareness out. A Buddhist friend of mine said, "What are the limits of this moment?" And as I contemplated that, my depression lifted. What are the limits of your awareness? It's all inside of you. What are the limits? Whose mind would you like to have? The one that sees the world in a limited way? Or the mind that was in Christ Jesus? Let us renew our minds. Awaken. As we set our intention, as we reserve some time to think about this, let us know that change is possible and always has been. And let our prayer be that we awaken to the truth. And so it is. Amen. I hope you got something out of today's service. We intend to bring you things that will help you in your life become more of who you want to be, give you the freedom of forgiveness and the hope of expectancy that your life will unfold in a way that brings you joy, happiness, and is a contribution to the world. If you would like to contribute to this ministry, please go to unitytriangle.org, hit the donate button, and it will lead you into an easy way of doing that. We thank you for your attention and look forward to seeing you again here.